My goals today include getting this lip to match up to the wall, so go straight up, so that I can reform it into the new suspension rings that we've made. And to do that, I'm going to anneal the copper around the top area here using a blowtorch, or an oxyacetylene torch. And once it's red hot and let it cool, it'll be dead soft, and I'll explain that later. So there's two reasons I want to reform the bearing edge. One is that it was formed unevenly. The suspension hoops that came with these drums were not really made very well. And the other reason is just having a new suspension ring and making a bespoke edge, if you will, I think will be worth the time. And you can also see how to repair your own bowls. Copper does what's called work hardening, where that means the more you move it, the more brittle or hard it becomes. That's why you can do something like snap a paper clip if you bend it a bunch of times. That's work hardening. So by annealing it, it'll make this really soft. I'll be able to pull it up almost with my fingers. So I may have to do that a couple times, but again, the goal is to get a flat side so that we can refit it to the new ring. So something interesting that's happening as I get rid of the bearing edge, all of a sudden I can squeeze the bowl more. That's not a result of annealing the edge, it's just a result of taking away a structural curve. This is called a hammer and a dolly. This is meant for car body work. Right now I'm just trying to get it straightened out. I don't want to hammer too much because it'll actually harden it. Now I need to re-anneal this anyway. I just want to make sure that I get this as straight as I can. But these surfaces are curved. So as they meet, they're making it nice and flat, spread out. So if you can't tell so far, by softening the copper allows me to move it. By hammering it, it's actually going to harden it. And that's why we hand hammer bowls, or rather even just hammer bowls. So one of the main differences between a spun bowl and a hammered bowl is how hard the copper actually is. Not to say spun bowls are any softer, but that's why we hammer spun bowls. It's not just a cosmetic thing, it'll actually create different harmonics coming from the bowl. So now that we've straightened the side of the bowls, I want to re-anneal it so that we continue to make sure that we don't crack the copper. When it gets too hard or brittle, it'll crack. So the hope today is to get the initial setting on the bearing edge. So there are a few basic ways to make the bearing edge, and I'm choosing to use the hammer method for two reasons. One, the age of the drum, that's how they were made back then. I think I kind of want to stick with that particular process. And the other reason is if you're curious how this can be done at home without any special jigs or anything like that, this is how it's done. That being said, you do need one jig to hold the bowl nice and tight into the frame. You'll see that here in a minute. So what I've done by grinding off the rivets on the back side is remove anything extra that's going to poke into the back of the bowl and create scratches and bumps. It's not super important, it's more cosmetic, but I do want as round of an inside as I can get. But grinding off the back of this doesn't create any issues because of that hole that we countersunk that's still holding the majority of the rivet. I basically removed the extra flared bit that doesn't do anything. So now I'm going to use a jig that I made. This is a 7/8 inch threaded rod. I made two tapered aluminum bits. This one runs loose, has a nut on the back side. This one is threaded, has a shoulder on it that's the same internal diameter as the bronze bushing. So when this goes up, it'll stay straight. This will straighten out the top, pull it nice and tight, and make sure that this rod is going straight enough. Then, this isn't really necessary, as I discovered in doing the 25. I have the 28 over my shoulder. But this is kind of a depth stop, and then I'll put another nut with a large piece of plywood that's round into the bottom of the bowl and really cinch it down tight so that when we bend the bearing edge over the suspension hoop, it doesn't pull up the bowl, which is a very real possibility. I discovered that the hard way because I've already done the lip on the 25 twice. If you check out my Facebook or Instagram, you will have seen that and you'll see what happened and how I fixed it. And now I'm going to show you how I make the bearing edge on the 28. So what I'm doing now is checking that none of the rivets are hitting the bowl. So I'm having to look back on the underside. I have about maybe 1/8 of an inch, 3/16 of an inch gap here. And that's where the side of the bowl kind of comes down at an angle. And if I like it, what I'm going to do next is take a permanent marker, go around and mark where the bowl is sitting at its current spot, and then re-hammer all the stuff that I heated up and annealed, because I'm not going to get to that when I bend the edge over, and I want that to be hard. This bowl doesn't ring at all. I hope that we'll hear a sound difference when I get done hammering. It's a little bit stiffer and a little bit more ringy. Keep in mind there's still a big dead soft spot up on top. So now that the bowl is where I want it, I'm going to put the plywood portion of the jig in here and really tighten it down, hoping to suck the bowl down into the ring. The ring is going to be stronger than the bowl. It'll conform to that. You can actually hear the bowl pulling down on that felt. Once I'm done getting the lip on, and this is important, then I'll subscribe. Then I'll scribe the line that shows where the bowl was made. I don't want to do that ahead of time because the bowl tends to kind of move around a little bit, and I don't want to have to rescribe. One thing I haven't mentioned yet, there is extra copper bowl. On the original rings, they had 3/16 inch thick steel. I went with 1/4 inch, and I made the mistake, I'm admitting a mistake here, in going with the outer diameter of the suspension ring rather than the inner diameter. So in effect, these bowls will be slightly smaller. However, it's a 28.5 and a 25.5. I think there's a little bit of leeway. So if I did this again, I would go with the inner diameter. Of course, my camera battery would die right as I get started making the lip. The process is simple. Go around as evenly as I can, hammering the bowl over. It's soft, so it's going to move. Now if we look back at the footage where the bowl was still floppy without the bearing edge, it didn't ring at all. Here's the first hit on this bowl. So the next step is to remove the bowls from the frames. They both have their witness marks on them, and they both have excess copper on the lip. Again, that's from making the suspension ring the same as the outer diameter rather than the inner diameter. Simple mistake, not a problem, because I knew I was going to redo the lips anyway. So the plan is to take a large Sharpie marker. I could have used Dykem Blue or layout fluid, but to take the Sharpie marker and mark the bearing edge, and then I'm going to go around with a very fine grit sandpaper on a handheld belt sander. My goal is to go around it as evenly as I can and get everything to be copper where the timpani head will bear on the edge. So this is after one pass. Those dark spots are low points, and we want to get down below those. We also don't want to take too much off the bowl and weaken the bearing edge. So I'm going to take one more pass with the 400, and then we'll go up to a higher grit.
Yeah.
So my camera battery died, but here's our finished bearing edge. Again, anywhere there's black showing, that's where it didn't get sanded. In other words, either a low spot, or in this case, I just didn't go that low.